Hi, my name is Dan Funk. Welcome back to another video about Spiff Workflow. Today we're showing a really cool feature, the sort of API or programming interface that you can build with BPMN diagrams. That means that you can author a BPMN diagram that's not just for end users, but for any program to call. So it's possible from anywhere to start a new workflow process up, have it execute. You can pass all kinds of interesting information into it. And I'm just going to point you out to where you can check this demo out yourself on spiffdemo.org. So go and log into it, click on examples. Then you'll navigate to in-depth topics. And here at the top is now a new process model called Message API. There's a really good README here at the front of it that will go over what the use cases are, and I'll just quickly talk you through some of them. So you could this gives you a way to really take over user interactions. So if you have an existing application that you're using to gather information from your end users, you can gather that information and post it to a workflow. So they're never logging into Spiff Workflow or completing anything. They're just entering their information in a form that you host on your website, and that spins up the workflow. And you can actually have workflows pause at certain points and await information that can also be completed later on in other parts of your website. You can also allow workflows to listen for other external events. So we've shown you through service calls how Spiff Workflow can communicate out to other third-party APIs and endpoints, but Spiff Workflow itself can be an API endpoint. So if you wanted to add a webhook into GitHub and say, every time this happens, I want you to call out to Spiff Workflow, which will start up a new workflow process, that's possible with this. Another example, and the one that's kind of closest to what we'll be doing today, is these do-it-yourself microservices. So imagine if your sales team wanted to supply the prices to your primary web application based off of some sort of criteria. Your web team or your sales team could take total control over that, and your web team could make these API calls out and ask the sales team API, hey, what prices am I representing today? How much does everything cost? What promo codes are available? What happens if what prices go along with this promotion code? All of those things become possible. So let's look at this really simple example, and then I'll come back out and show you how to execute it directly from the command line. So I'm going to go into the files here and the message API. And you'll see the diagram here. I'll kind of stretch this over a little bit and zoom it in. Is very simple. It's just a start, a DMN table is what I'm using for this particular process, but anything can happen in here. And then an end task. The start task is special. It's a message. So if I click off of everything, you'll see that I've got messages over here. I can fold this down, and you can see that there's one message defined for this called popcorn. And if I click on the message itself, you'll see that it is associated with popcorn. And what it's going to do is whatever information comes in, whatever you push into this, is going to get stored in a variable called request. From there, we can look at this DMN table. So let me go ahead and open this up. It's very simple. All it's doing, just to provide an example, is taking looking at the request for a variable called size. And if the size is large, it's going to return 15. If the size is medium, it's going to return 12. And if the size is small, it's going to return 8. These DMN tables can get much more complicated. There's a ton more you can do, but really wanted to get across how the API worked. And the fact that once that API comes in, you can build anything that you would ever build out of a BPMN file. So just to kind of jump back here, that's it. Message comes in, we store it in a variable called request. We recheck the size inside the request and use that to calculate a price, and then we stop. So what happens when we call this, and how do we call it? So let's go back out to the message API and just scroll a little bit lower in this README file and follow along with what it tells us to do. So how to run this demo. The first thing we need to do is generate an API key. So I'm going to come up here to my account and click on API keys. And I've already got one called my key, but I'll create another one called my key 2 and submit it. And this is going to give me this like long UUID number, and I'm just going to copy that and save it over here somewhere so I have it. And from there, I'm just going to go back to the process model we were looking at. And I'm going to copy this this template, this curl. So curl is just a command line function that you can call, and I'm just going to paste it in here. But I need to fill out the details. So the base URL here is going to be https://api.spiffdemo.org. The /v1, that's just our the version of the API that we're at right now. /messages tells it you want to send a message, and then you put the message name in here. And if you recall, what we call this message was popcorn. So we're going to send a popcorn message in. It's important if you want to see what happens, if you want to like have the process run as greedily as possible to complete as many engine tasks as it can. You just set the execution mode to synchronous. If you don't want to wait and you want it to return instantly, you can leave this off or make this call asynchronous. At which point it will kick the process off, but it won't make you wait for it to do anything. But it's a little more interesting to make it synchronous and then get back the result, which is really what we want to see. And here the next thing we need to fill out is that API key. So I'm just going to go back and copy that thing that we just created and paste it in here. And then our context types, application JSON, nothing to do there. And then the data. And if you recall, what we were looking at was the size, and then it'll return us a price. So we'll give it a size of large. And what that should do is return 15. So I'll just hit enter. And then we get a response back. And there's lots of information here to tell us, like, debugging information, what process ID it was, what actual process ended up accepting that message, when it started, when it ended, what its status is, so you can kind of tell if there was any errors, and like error information can come back. But what's most interesting is in the task data. So once this process completed, you can see that like the request size of large came in and it calculated that price of 15. If we ran this again and changed the size to medium, we should get 12. And indeed we do. Task data comes back, the price is 12. So that is how to use BPMN to build your own API endpoints, to kick off workflows externally from whatever application you happen to be using. I hope that was helpful, and I look forward to hearing any of your feedback in the comments below. Thank you so much for listening.